Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And my guest today is Joe Mangano. He is the executive director for the Radiation and Public Health Project in New York. And the Radiation and Public Health Project is a nonprofit educational and scientific organization established by scientists and physicians dedicated to understanding the relationships between low-level nuclear radiation and public health. Joe is the author of 38 medical journal articles and the books Radioactive Baby Teeth, The Cancer Link, Mad Science, The Nuclear Power Experiment, and Low-Level Radiation and Immune Disease, An Atomic Era Legacy. Joe, welcome.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being my guest. I know we talked years ago about another project, which we'll talk about a little later, hopefully. But I'd just like to dive right in because there's so much here. So I'm going to start with reading a paragraph from an article that you wrote with Robert Alvarez in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. It says, how many nuclear weapons can be detonated in support of weapons development or during a war before imperiling humans from radioactive fallout? That's the question the Atomic Energy Commission asked in the 1950s. And to find the answer, independent scientists and citizens turned to baby teeth. Lots and lots of baby teeth. So why baby teeth, and what were you doing with them?
Well, we're turning the clock way back to the 1950s. And that was the beginning of the atomic age. The atomic bombs on Japan had been dropped, and followed very quickly by a race between the US and the Soviet Union to test and build as many atomic bombs as possible for what both sides believed was going to be an inevitable nuclear war. It was a very disturbing time. I know we live in disturbing times now, but this may arguably might have been worse, because we really were talking about potential world destruction. In all, about 500 atomic bombs were tested above the ground during the period.
In America, or America and Russia, or around the world?
Out of the 500, the US had 216, the Soviets probably a little less, and then the remainder were England, France, and China.
So here we are. The atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, death and destruction and radiation and all of that. And now we start doing that above ground, testing it as if there are no consequences?
Pretty much. The military mindset was in control here. I mean, the military leaders and a number of political leaders on both sides, the US and Soviet sides, saw this as a way to win wars. And
so let's kind of fast forward to, okay, somewhere along the way, we got a clue that this is not good for us. And now you're talking about baby teeth. So how did that come about?
Well, as the testing went on, and as the concern about nuclear war went on, there was also a concern that with every bomb explosion, those big mushroom clouds, the fallout, which consisted of over 100 radioactive chemicals that you don't find in nature, but only when atomic bombs explode or nuclear reactors operate. These 100 chemicals got way up in the stratosphere, drifted with prevailing winds, and came back into the environment through rain and snow, through precipitation, and thus got into the food chain, through reservoirs, through farms, and really it went all the way around the world, and everybody living at the time consumed these poisonous products. And thus the question was raised, is this harmful to humanity? The party line of leaders in both countries was, no, these levels are too low to cause harm. But many people didn't believe that. We had to prove that. And the way baby teeth came around was it was probably the easiest way to detect levels of this fallout in bodies. And because first of all, there is, out of the over 100 chemicals in the fallout clouds, there's one of them was called strontium 90, a very, very deadly poison. And it is a lot like calcium. When the body takes it in, it quickly goes into the stomach and into the bloodstream, and then attaches to bone and teeth, where it remains for a lifetime. And as opposed to other ways to check how much radiation got into bodies, which would involve autopsies and biopsies and blood samples and urine samples, this was a matter of baby teeth that naturally fell out of bodies. If they could be collected and tested for levels of this chemical, strontium 90, we would get an idea of how much was getting in the body. So, and this was not just a fly-by-night idea. An article in the journal Nature in 1958, and a federal scientist, Herman Kalkar, proposed a worldwide census of baby teeth. And in
so then what happened?
Well, in the United States, this article was read, including by several scientists and physicians from Washington University in St. Louis. They got together and said, you know what? This is really important. We have to do this. This is the only way we're going to halt the ongoing number of these terrible tests, is to prove it's getting in our children's bodies and to prove that the levels are getting higher and higher. So in 1958, a coalition of two groups. One was Washington University, the scientists, and the other was the Citizens Group, Committee for Nuclear Information, both based in St. Louis, got together and pledged to do the study. And over the next dozen years or so, they collected an incredible 320,000 baby teeth, mostly from the St. Louis area, but really from all around the country and even overseas. Teeth were tested in a specialty lab, and the findings were quite disturbing. They found that the average amount of this chemical, strontium 90, over a 12-year period went up 50 times. Not 50%, 50 times, which is 5,000% more. So children born in the early 1960s were getting much, much more than those, say, born in 1950.
And strontium 90 is associated with cancer, yes?
Yes, just like all the other radioactive chemicals in
Yes.
the mushroom cloud. Yes, it is a carcinogen and has been proved to be so by this time. It was used on animals, and they all died of bone and other cancers.
So are there statistics that show years later that people were dying at an earlier age, or these baby boomers were getting cancer at a higher rate?
Before I answer that, let me finish my prior answer,
Sure.
please.
Absolutely.
To show how much was known about strontium 90 and cancer, in 1943, this was during World War II, this is as they were building the original bomb, a letter was written by Robert Oppenheimer to Enrico Fermi. These are two very famous names in American history. Both were working on bomb testing. And Oppenheimer, who later became a great critic of the bomb and the proliferation of nuclear weapons, wrote that if our bomb project doesn't work, we could still consider putting strontium 90 in the water system of Nazi Germany, provided it kills at least 500,000 people. This was kept secret until the mid-1980s. You can easily find it on Google now, but that's just an
So that's how
example to
dangerous
show
it
you
is.
how they knew that this was really bad. So really the worst poisons on the planet. Okay, as far as the health issue, the purpose of the baby tooth study was to stop testing, was to get a ban on above ground testing, which did happen in 1963. However, as efforts were made to reach this goal, there was discussion about, okay, we're gonna get these tests stopped, hopefully, but in the meantime, are they harming our children? There was an article, for example, in Newsweek magazine in 1960. But what about the children who've done their growing through during these tests? Are they at greater risk for cancer? And there was even discussion in St. Louis about whether or not there should be a follow-up study following children to see how much of the strontium 90 they received and their health later on. It wasn't done for technical reasons and for funding reasons. But that's where the story picks up many years later. I should say, too, that, again, the test ban treaty was signed in August 1963 by Kennedy and Khrushchev and the UK.
So I just want to ask you a question here. So they banned above ground testing. Underground testing continued. Just briefly, is there any indication that that has health consequences?
Underground testing, which continued until the end of the Cold War, about 1990, does have health consequences as well. There were a number of leaks into the environment,
Okay.
but at much lower levels than the above ground tests.
Right.
And the point I was going to make was when the debate was on about the test ban treaty, Kennedy gave a speech from the White House and in favor of the treaty, and he said, he used the phrase, our children with cancer in their bones, with leukemia in their blood, with poison in their lungs. They are, our children and grandchildren are of concern to us all. So the point here is not only did he and other public officials know this is a health issue, he said with children with cancer in their bones, as I said a few minutes ago, strontium 90 goes directly to bone and teeth. And because the baby tooth study was looking at bomb testing, and because as articles were written, they were sent to Kennedy's science advisor, who shared them with the president. They all knew this was a health issue, but no one touched it for many years.
So then what results have we got for those baby boomers in terms of seeing them years later and evidence that it impacted them and that they had a higher cancer rate?
Well, what happened was in 2001, I got a phone call from one of my colleagues in St. Louis from Washington University, Daniel Cole. I got to know a number of the people who worked on the original tooth study because our group, RPHP, did a similar study, not about bomb testing, but near nuclear reactors, which released the same mix of chemicals as bombs did. And Dr. Cole told me, he said, we've been in looking for storage space, and we went to this place near St. Louis, and we found teeth. And I said, oh, you mean teeth from the old study? He goes, yes. We weren't there long. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll have to spend more time. And the next day he called and said, okay, you better prepare yourself. There are thousands and thousands of teeth. And so what it turned out to be was, out of those 320,000 collected, 100,000 were never tested. And what was left in several hundred boxes were baby teeth each in a small manila envelope, paper clipped to a card, a 3x5 card with information about the tooth and who donated the tooth. John Smith, born January 1, 1960, parents John and Mary, incisor tooth, the address where they were born, and so on. And Washington University donated the teeth to us. They had no further use for it. Barry Commoner, who was a biologist at Washington U for many years and was a leader of the study, said, no, I don't have any further use for them, but why don't you call Mangano's group? They're doing a study of baby teeth. We
So now
accepted them.
what have you done with them? And I want to make sure we get all this in so that people really are aware of the results of this. So what have you found?
We accepted them because we knew that the health issue had never been answered, even though this was 50 years later. Okay, people who donated teeth were now in their 50s and 60s. A number were developing cancer or dying, and this was a perfect way to measure any risk from the bomb tests, because the strontium-90 was still in the body and still could be measured years later. So for a long time, for about 20 years, we didn't do much with them because of a lack of funds. We did do one study where we took 40 baby teeth and from people born in the late 1950s. We divided them into those who had died of cancer by 50 and those who were alive at 50 had no health problems. We tested them in a lab, and we found out that the cancer group had more than double the strontium-90 in their teeth as the healthy group. We published it in a medical journal, one of our 38 articles. It is a relatively small study, but we knew we had something here, and we are now poised to expand this analysis a lot. We believe out of the 100,000 teeth, which equates to 37,000 people, some gave more than one tooth. Out of that, over 6,000 have died, and almost 2,000 of them have died of cancer. So the way we're going to be able to do this is we partnered with the Harvard University School of Public Health in 2017. They are interested in the baby teeth, not for bomb fallout, but for health effects later in life of exposure to heavy metals, which can be found in teeth, things like lead and mercury. Harvard got a grant from the federal government, the National Institutes of Health, and the grant paid for the automation, entering into an Excel file of these 100,000 teeth, which gave us the ability to conduct this study. And soon we're going to do a request to the National Death Index. We're going to send the names of people that donated teeth, and we'll know who of them are deceased, when they died, what they died of, including cancer. And we're going to do that same comparison of 20 teeth, only on a much larger scale.
So I have a question. The evidence is there. The evidence has been there for a long time. And clearly, we don't take a lot of significant action, or the government doesn't take a lot of significant action. So I have two questions. Like, what's the end game? We continue providing information, but what's the expectation? And the other thing is, if someone watching is like 20 years old and says, well, I'm not a baby boomer, what do I have to be worried about?
The question is raised a lot, like, okay, that was a very bad period of time, but we no longer test bombs above the ground. We no longer test bombs below the ground. Okay, what's the point? Yes, if the baby boomers were affected, it doesn't happen anymore. The point needs to be made that the same chemical mix from those big mushroom clouds, the atomic bombs, is the same mix that is created in nuclear power reactors, released into the environment, where it gets into bodies, that we've found out with our study of baby teeth near reactors. And we are going to compare strontium-90 in baby teeth of people born in the 50s and 60s, the baby boomers who got bomb fallout early in life, and today's children living near reactors who got it not from bomb fallout, but from reactor emissions. Who got more? How much more? And when we know what happened to the baby boomers, can we predict what's going to happen to today's children if we continue to operate these nuclear reactors, which we maintain should be shut and replaced by safe forms of energy, such as wind and solar? So it really is, it's not just an idle look at the past. It is really a very relevant project.
And I know you've been working for a lot of years on collecting evidence around the nuclear power plants, particularly Oyster Creek, as I remember it, and they finally shut that down. But in today's world, everybody, we're very short-sighted. We want to do what looks like we're taking action, and it's effective action, and it's right now, as opposed to, long forward thinking. And so now the world is saying, yes, we can't depend on oil and this, that, and the other thing. And lots of countries are focusing on building more nuclear power plants.
There's a lot of talk about building new power plants, but talk often doesn't become action. In this country, in the United States, since 1996, no new nuclear reactors have opened. They're working on 2 of them now in Georgia. They began construction in the year 2006. It is now 17 years later. They're not done. The original estimated cost of the project, which was $12 billion, has now spiraled past $30 billion and counting. Okay, which leaves us with old, brittle, corroding, leaking nuclear reactors. Okay. And from a health standpoint, not just from a dollar standpoint or an energy standpoint, but from a health standpoint, we have done several studies of what happens to local health when a nuclear plant closes down. And we found in every case, the first 2 years after shutdown, among the very youngest, infant deaths plunged everywhere. And the new cases of cancer in children aged 4 and younger plunged, right? We did a longer-term study of a reactor that closed in Sacramento in the 1980s and found that long-term, the declines occurred for not just children, but adults as well, which equated to something like 4,500 fewer cancer cases in 20 years. So.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a key point, because it's not just all doom. That if we take action, we can certainly improve the public health, the health of our children.
So it's so interesting, and when you've got the evidence, and I mean, when you talk about infant deaths plunging and childhood cancer plunging. Why isn't this being screamed from the headlines? Like, why aren't people, more mobilized, more educated, more informed?
I'm going to say that our society is a society that's full of problems, full of environmental problems. This is not the only one. I mean, the idea of climate change is a major thing, which really has caught on. However, I would maintain that even though each of these environmental concerns are serious, there are no worse poisons on the planet than these radioactive chemicals. Okay, if we had an all-out nuclear war, that would be the end of humanity. All right, maybe not instantly, but within a matter of some years. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm sorry to say, but I'm convinced that the reason that the resistance continues is just like in the 1940s and 50s, the leaders believe that maintaining an arsenal of nuclear weapons is a strategic advantage militarily over other countries. And anything that distracts from nuclear weapons, okay, other uses of the atom, such as nuclear electric power, either distracts people from the weapons part or makes the weapons issue look good. That was really how we got nuclear power in the first place. Eisenhower made a famous speech when he became president, atoms for peace. Yes, the bomb is bad, but we can use the atom for so many different things, including for electric generation. That mentality still exists today, and that's why reactors are shutting down. 13 shutdowns in the last decade and 92 to go. But that's the shutdowns are slow, and
Yes.
they're dragging their feet on it.
So, Joe, we have exactly a minute and a half left. Is there something you want to say, some request you have from the audience, just some suggestion?
The final comment I would have is that just like in the baby tooth study years ago, the only way to make a public health change, to improve public health, is through grassroots efforts. Okay, the baby tooth study years ago was a wonderful combination of scientists working with citizens to do something for the public good. And the same exists here. Everywhere we've gone with our work and our health research and the evidence about the harm of reactors has been accompanied by concerned citizens trying to close down these dangerous reactors and have them replaced with safe alternatives. So this is really an exercise in democracy and an exercise in the ability of citizens to affect the world.
Thank you. And I invite people to check out your website, radiation.org. There, I know you have events and articles and all of that. It's a place to start.
Yes, you'll see right on the homepage, research on 100,000 baby teeth begins, and
Yeah.
there's much to be read there.
Yes. Joe, thank you so much. I think we all need to hear this, and I appreciate the work that you do. And we can reconnect in a year from now and see what has happened.
It'll be my pleasure.
Thank you. My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.